A threat by New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio to, quote, permanently shut down houses of worship that continue to hold public services has religious freedom advocates on alert. De Blasio made the comments Friday, warning that religious communities continuing to hold services in violation of the city's ban on gatherings of any size would have those services shut down. The mayor went on to say those congregations could be subject to additional actions, including fines, as well as potentially closing the buildings permanently. Joining me now by Skype to talk more about this is Montse Alvarado. She is Vice President and Executive Director at Becket, a nonprofit law firm dedicated to protecting religious freedom. Montse, good to see you. Welcome back.
Good to see you too. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So what do you make of Mayor de Blasio's comments?
You know, there's no way that what he actually meant to say is permanent closure of churches, synagogues, mosques. These religious entities are never going to be closed permanently. The First Amendment, no matter whether we're in a national crisis or not, a global pandemic, it still stands. In the United States of America, our First Amendment freedoms continue to stand.
Well, Catholic churches in the Archdiocese of New York and the Diocese of Brooklyn, which covers all 5 of the boroughs in New York City, suspended the public celebration of Mass earlier this month. However, there are other faiths that are continuing to hold these services. You touched on this, but do they have the right to do that despite the social distancing guidelines?
In moments of national crisis, the government is allowed to use its emergency powers to make sure that we're all safe. That's a legal principle that we call compelling interest. But at the same time, those emergency powers that are given to the government are temporary. So we have to remember that that's a temporary reality that we have to check when all of this is over. We had a great reference to this in the New York Times today, where they were talking about some of the emergency powers that still exist for the government after 9/11. Those are things that should not be. And so, yes, the government has an interest in keeping us safe and keeping us healthy and making sure that our communities aren't spreading this virus. That is true. But at the same time, they have to create these laws aware of the needs and the essential realities for these religious communities. So these are also essential services. Going to confession for Catholics is something that should continue.
All right. Well, another big talker just yesterday, the pastor of a church in Florida turned himself into authorities after detectives say that he held 2 Sunday services with hundreds of people and violated a safer at home order in place to limit the spread of the virus. That pastor, Rodney Howard Brown, calls his ministry, quote, an essential service and says that social distancing guidelines were practiced. I know you heard about this. What are your thoughts?
You know, these are moments where everyone is doing their best. And we're all shooting from the hip because we don't want to be caught with our pants down in the middle of a crisis, right? So the reality is we're doing everything we can to pull and to get everyone to come together. And in order to do that, sometimes you're going to make an example out of people. And it's not the best thing to do. We need charity and grace in these moments where religion and government are coming together to solve the crisis. You're seeing some beautiful realities of that. Some wonderful people that are using their religious ministries to create masks for people, or using some of the resources that religious communities have to feed people who are living hand to mouth from their schools. The reality is that this is the moment for us to have that charity and have some conversations before we're making arrests.
Well, Montse, thank you so much for coming on and for sharing your insight with us. We really appreciate it. Montse Alvarado, Vice President and Executive Director at Becket. Thanks again.